Hi guys, I'm Jackie.
Jacqueline Aids, an esthetician from Paradise Valley, took the concept of love bombing to a chilling new level when she was found and arrested inside the home of the man she had been obsessively stalking, calmly taking a bath as if she belonged there. According to reports, Aids had met the man, whose identity remains undisclosed for privacy reasons, through a luxury dating app called Luxy, a platform designed for wealthy individuals to connect and arrange exclusive dates. The two exchanged a few messages and went out together once, but after the evening didn't go the way she had hoped, the man politely told her he didn't want to see her again. For most people, that would have been the end. But for Jacqueline, it marked the beginning of an unrelenting fixation. Over the following months, she sent the man more than 65,000 messages, a disturbing combination of desperate declarations of love and explicit, violent threats. She began showing up uninvited, tracking his movements, and inserting herself into his life in ways that grew increasingly unpredictable. Her texts became darker with each passing week, crossing from unsettling to terrifying. She reportedly wrote that she wanted to bathe in his blood, wear his flesh, and carve parts of him into objects. In other messages, she described graphically violent acts, speaking of them as though they were expressions of love. To her, these were romantic gestures. To him, it was a nightmare that seemed impossible to escape. When she was finally arrested, investigators found her behavior erratic and alarming. During questioning, her statements were riddled with contradictions and unpredictable statements.
So the rest of the equation is L equals 3.3. L equals 3.3 times E equals MC squared, and that's the equation of eternal love.
She told the police she had no intention of hurting the man she loved, but also admitted she would do anything if he ever left her. She spoke with unwavering conviction, referring to herself as his wife, even though they had only been on a single date. Her interviews revealed clear signs of deteriorating mental health. Psychological evaluations later determined that Jacqueline Aids was not mentally competent to stand trial, and as a result, her charges were dropped. What she believed to be a fairy tale romance turned into a disturbing ordeal, one that blurred the line between love, delusion, and obsession. And from a twisted fixation, we head to a family's worst nightmare. What comes next is even more personal. This Halloween, we're doing something we've never done before. All week long, you can complete challenges to earn points. The top scorer wins the ultimate prize. Here's how it works. Post your scariest CreepyVids moment on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. Ask people to subscribe. Use the hashtag #CreepyHalloween. And tag our channels with the links in the description. That's 30 points per post, 1 per day. Leave comments under CreepyVids, ScaryVids, or DeepVids videos. Up to 3 comments per video count, worth 5 points each. Invite a friend to subscribe. If they leave a comment saying, "I joined thanks to," you'll get 10 points for every new subscriber. Watch carefully for the hidden word. Each day, a letter will appear, with the final letter revealed in the October 31st Halloween special. Guess the full word and email it to us for 20 points. Join in every single day, and you'll earn a 25-point loyalty bonus. And on Halloween night, a special bonus challenge will be revealed in the CreepyVids Halloween special. And winners will be announced on November 3rd. Third place gets a CreepyVids t-shirt of your choice. Second place also gets a CreepyVids t-shirt of your choice. And the first place will get a $25 Amazon gift card plus CreepyVids t-shirt of your choice. Let's see who stayed the most active. Let the best fans win. On October 2nd, 2006, Frances Elaine Campione sat in front of a camera in her apartment, recording what at first seemed like a bitter message about her failed marriage. Years earlier, when she was just 20, Frances had moved to Ontario, where she met Leo Campione. They married, started a family, and for a brief moment, built what appeared to be a stable life. But beneath the surface, the relationship had already begun to fracture. What followed was a long and bitter divorce and custody battle, and a slow descent into something much darker. In the video, Frances's voice trembled with rage and desperation as she spoke about Leo. She claimed God was protecting their children, lacing her words with an unsettling certainty. Her tone carried more than anger. It carried intent.
3 years of physical, emotional, and mental abuse that I endured tremendously by Leonardo Campione, and in the past year from Anna and Diego Campione, the mental and emotional abuse, which wouldn't stop, and I had CAS keep bringing these two people into my life over and over again when I kept telling them the amount of mental and emotional abuse it was causing my 3-year-old daughter Serena and I and Sophia. It was horrible and uncalled for, and I want justice to my family for what they have all done to us. I cried out for help. They should have charged him for the assaults he did to me, the assaults he did to my oldest daughter Serena, and they did nothing for us.
She accused everyone around her of failing her and her children, framing herself as the victim in a world that had turned against her. But what those words concealed was far more horrifying. Just hours before recording the video, Frances had drowned her 2 young daughters, Serena and Sophia, in the bathtub of their apartment. They were no older than 3 years old. After the killings, she dressed their small bodies in pajamas, posed them on a bed, and attempted to take her own life. She failed. Frances was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Over the following 7 weeks, the trial painted a harrowing picture of a woman whose mental health had long been deteriorating. Her lawyers argued she should be found not guilty by reason of insanity, pointing to multiple psychiatric hospitalizations, suicide attempts, and paranoid delusions. But the prosecution pointed again and again to that video, her calculated, composed words, spoken with a clear awareness of what she had done. On November 5, 2010, a jury found Frances guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict reflected that despite her psychiatric history, she had understood that killing was wrong and did it anyway to inflict pain on her ex-husband. She was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. In 2015, some of her appeals were denied by the Ontario Court of Appeal. Controversy followed when Judge Alfred Stong, who presided over the trial, later implied that if it had been within his power, he might have overturned the jury's verdict, suggesting her actions stemmed from years of abuse. But to the public, and especially to those who knew Serena and Sophia, what Frances did was unforgivable. Her video, recorded on the day of the murders, remains one of the most chilling pieces of evidence in the case. And that takes us to this next story, which is just as chilling, but in a very different way. On April 22, 2012, 41-year-old Peter Keller, a self-proclaimed survivalist from North Bend, Washington, carried out a plan he had spent years quietly preparing for. That night, he murdered his wife, Lynette, and their daughter, Kayleen, shooting them both in the head while they slept. He then turned the gun on the family pets, executing them too, before setting their house ablaze in an attempt to erase every trace of what he'd done. But Peter Keller hadn't snapped in a single night. This was the endgame of an 8-year plan. Deep in the forest near Rattlesnake Ridge, Keller had built a hidden world for himself. A 2-story underground bunker carved 20 feet into a hillside. Its log cabin walls, narrow passageways, and reinforced structure were a survivalist's fantasy. Inside, he had everything: stockpiled food, weapons, ammunition, solar panels, a generator, and a police scanner. He was convinced the end of the world was coming, and he intended to outlive it. In his mind, the murders were mercy killings, a way to spare his family from a future he believed was inevitable. Meanwhile, authorities launched a massive manhunt. Investigators pieced together clues from scorched computers, cell phone records, and old photographs recovered from the burned house. With every fragment of information, the trail led them deeper into the woods. And then, it led straight to his bunker. Peter's hideout was both ingenious and horrifying, a fortress buried in silence. As SWAT teams surrounded the area, what followed was a tense 22-hour standoff. They used explosives to blow through the bunker's roof, preparing for the worst. When they entered on April 28, 2012, they found Peter Keller dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. But his final act wasn't the end of the story. Inside the bunker, investigators found something far more disturbing: a video diary Peter had recorded 2 weeks before the murders. In it, he spoke with unnerving calm, laying out his plans to abandon society, acknowledging that death might be part of it. "I can always shoot myself," he said, "and I'm okay with that." Every word in that recording matched the reality he created. He never wavered. He never questioned it. Whether Peter Keller truly believed the apocalypse was coming or simply used it as an excuse will never be known. But his actions made one thing clear: his quiet preparations were never about survival. They were always about the end. And while this story was years in the making, the next unfolded in seconds. On December 6, 2024, 20-year-old Harshandept Singh was midway through his shift as a security guard when his life was cut short in a way no one could have imagined. An international student from Haryana, India, Harshandept had come to Canada to build a future for himself. He was studying at Norquest College in Edmonton and had been in the country for just 18 months. It was only his third day on the job. While patrolling the stairwell of an apartment complex, Harshandept encountered two individuals, 30-year-old Evan Rain and Judith Stowow. In an instant, the situation escalated. He was shoved down the stairs, losing his balance, and before he could get back to his feet or escape, a gunshot rang out. He was shot from behind. Residents called emergency services after hearing the blast echo through the building. When police arrived, they found Harshandept lying unresponsive at the bottom of the stairwell. He was rushed to the hospital, but despite efforts to save him, he was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. Evan Rain and Judith Stowow were both arrested and charged with first-degree murder. For his family back in India, the news shattered everything. A young man who had crossed an ocean for education and opportunity had been taken away in seconds. His death sent shockwaves through the local community, a stark reminder of how violence can find its way into even the most ordinary of moments. And now onto this next story, which doesn't involve a killer at all, but it's haunting all the same. Timothy Birmingham is a food reviewer on YouTube, best known for his simplistic, down-to-earth videos. For the most part, Timothy comes across as a wholesome man, enjoying life and filming himself as he eats and reviews different meals.
Hey everybody, how you doing? It's Cooking with Timothy. Tonight gonna be having air-fried pork chops.
However, in January 2017, things took a much darker turn when he uploaded what initially seemed like a routine vlog. The video began with Timothy filming his wife, Penny, who appeared to be sleeping soundly in bed. He quietly left the room, remarking on how unusual it was for her to be asleep so late in the day. Turning the camera toward the clock, he showed that it was already noon and noted that Penny would normally be awake by then, either sitting at her computer or busy with something around the house. What Timothy didn't yet realize was that his wife had tragically passed away during the night. While he moved through the house, filming in his usual calm and cheerful tone, the weight of what had happened lingered silently in the background. There was something chilling in the contrast, the ordinary rhythm of his morning set against a reality he hadn't yet uncovered. As he talked casually to the camera, the house felt unusually still, almost frozen in time, as if holding on to a terrible secret. For the rest of the video, Timothy went about his day, completely unaware of the heartbreaking truth. Viewers who saw the vlog before it was taken down later described how unsettling it was to watch. The way he carried on, laughing softly to himself, while the tragedy remained just a few steps away in the other room. Although the original vlog has long since been set to private, Timothy has occasionally spoken about his late wife, and he even uploaded a heartfelt tribute to her. It was clear that Penny's passing left a deep and lasting mark on him, one that quietly reshaped the tone of his channel and the man behind it. This story was quiet and personal, but the loss is one that unfolded in public, in front of everyone. On January 4th, 2019, at around 1 p.m., 51-year-old Lee Pomeroy boarded a train at London Road, Guildford railway station with his 14-year-old son. It was meant to be an ordinary ride home, a simple father and son trip on a winter afternoon. But within minutes, that ordinary journey would turn into a nightmare. At the very next stop, 36-year-old Darren Pencil stepped onto the train. The two men had never met before. Their paths crossed by chance, and yet, that chance encounter would end in bloodshed. Almost immediately, Darren and Lee exchanged words over something as trivial as a blocked aisle. It lasted only a few seconds. Darren walked away, heading into the next carriage. But Lee, still upset, decided to follow, leaving his 14-year-old son behind on the train. What happened next unfolded in less than half a minute. In the next carriage, the two men stood face to face, their voices rising, fingers pointed. Tension tightened like a wire ready to snap. Then, in just 25 seconds, Darren reached into his pocket, pulled out a knife, and stabbed Lee 18 times in a brutal, frenzied attack. Darren fled the train at the next station, where his girlfriend was waiting to pick him up. Back on board, Lee's son sat alone, surrounded by chaos as paramedics rushed in at Clandon railway station, near Horsley. But it was too late. Lee Pomeroy was pronounced dead at the scene. The following day, Darren Pencil was arrested at his girlfriend's home. On July 12, 2019, he was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. A brief argument, a chance encounter, 25 seconds that left a 14-year-old boy without his father, and a nation stunned by the sheer speed and brutality of the crime. And with that, we head over to this next case that doesn't involve a killer, but it's no less terrifying. Sarah Alexandra Badley Kirby was 30 years old when she vanished into the open sea after a tragic accident in 2012 on board a luxury cruise ship known as Carnival Destiny. She and her fiancé had booked the 5-day Caribbean cruise as a birthday getaway, expecting nothing more than warm nights, ocean breezes, and a small slice of paradise. But paradise can turn to horror in an instant. On the night of the incident, Sarah spent hours at the ship's bar and casino. According to her later claims, the bartender kept serving her drinks and even offered discounts, despite her being visibly and dangerously intoxicated. She believed it was a tactic to keep her gambling, a way to turn her celebration into profit for the ship. Eventually, she left the bar and returned to her room, but the heavy drinking had taken its toll. Feeling sick, she stepped out onto the private balcony for fresh air. The only thing between her and the dark, endless ocean was a railing. When she leaned against it, her balance slipped. In an instant, Sarah plunged 7 decks down into the cold black water below. On the way down, she struck a life raft, shattering her body before she even hit the sea. Her fiancé, friends, and several passengers witnessed the fall and frantically alerted the crew. But what happened next only deepened the tragedy. Instead of turning the ship around or stopping immediately for a rescue, the captain continued sailing forward for over an hour and a half. By the time the vessel finally slowed, Sarah had already been in the freezing water for more than 2 hours, alone, injured, and drifting in the darkness. When rescue boats finally reached her, she was barely conscious, hypothermic, and critically hurt. Her ribs were fractured, her orbital bones broken, her lungs bruised. Blood clots and hematomas marked the brutal impact of her fall. Yet the ship's medical team only administered painkillers and refused to authorize an emergency airlift. Later, doctors on land confirmed what should have been obvious from the start. The cruise ship lacked the equipment, skill, and urgency to handle her condition. Sarah survived, but the scars of that night would last forever. She filed a federal lawsuit against Carnival Cruise Line and the onboard medical team, accusing them of extreme negligence. What was meant to be a birthday celebration at sea had turned into a nightmare, one that exposed the devastating consequences when help doesn't come fast enough. Now, while that was an accident in open waters, this last story centers on a location known for something far more sinister. In the summer of 1999, a high school student named Chris Childrey set out to film what was meant to be a simple project for the George Washington High School Art and Literary magazine. He wanted to capture the eerie atmosphere of a place his classmates often whispered about, a spot in Virginia known locally as Satan's Bridge. At first, the footage seemed like nothing more than an exploration of a strange rural landmark. But as Chris pressed record, the camera began documenting something far more disturbing. Scattered around the area were the remains of dead animals, some fully intact skeletons, others torn apart and stuffed into trash bags, discarded in ditches like they were nothing. Most of the remains appeared to be deer, leading some to believe it could have been the work of careless hunters. But the more Chris filmed, the less convinced he became. He decided to look beneath the bridge, following his gut. And that's where the real horror began. Underneath, he found 5 large stones arranged in the shape of a pentagram, with ashes and sand carefully laid out between them. A piece of burned paper lay nearby, a religious tract marked with the words of John 3:16. Black candles were scattered around the area, melted and burned down to nubs. It was a textbook setup for a ritual site, and it left no doubt in his mind that something far darker than hunting was happening here. Chris would later recall that what he filmed was only part of what he encountered. Out of respect, he never recorded the most disturbing things he saw. Multiple human bodies found near the bridge throughout 1999 and 2000. The grim pattern convinced him that what was happening beneath Satan's Bridge wasn't random. It was organized. It was ritual. Shaken by what he had uncovered, Chris eventually stopped visiting the site altogether. But over time, word of his footage spread, turning Satan's Bridge into a local legend. Today, it's often treated as a teenage hangout spot, a place where people go to test their courage or tell ghost stories. But beneath the layers of time and rumor, the unsettling history of what may have taken place there still lingers. And some say the rituals never fully stopped. Now that was all for today, folks. If you enjoyed these horrifying clips, click to see more on the video on screen.